Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to be discussing this reference book, Exponential Organizations. I came across this a few weeks ago, I guess, in a portion of a different video, and had not read the book and kind of thought, wow, it sounds interesting. Maybe I'll take a look. And so I bought the book and got it last week, took a look, read it, and was not amused. Okay, so the book actually is interesting in raising some topics around speed of proliferation of certain businesses. So it talks about a little bit about, I guess the new sharing businesses, the social media businesses, and businesses that are related to that, and calls them the new modern footprint or exponential organization. There's a few in here that were mentioned that were worth calling out. Okay, so one was a map company that other companies were buying large assets to do mapping with, and were going to do that as a app that they were then going to sell. And at the same time, someone used sharing from phones to set up a company that was very similar, which kind of destroyed the thought process around it. But where this book got me was on page 50. This is the quote: "Any company designed for success in the 20th century is doomed for failure in the 21st. This is false. And basically that quote for the remainder of the book, and I'll show you, in my copy I wrote no right there. As I continued through the book, that was echoed throughout. So long story short, here's the point. Businesses have been in proliferation and been going for thousands of years, right? Some for dozens of thousands of years, out of a better way to say that. And business is what it is, meaning it will always be there in the way it is. Yes, information technology now has changed things dramatically. The speed in which you can save, transfer, share massive amounts of data is unprecedented in history, and there are certain revenue lines that can come from that very quickly. Now, as those lines are found, identified, capitalized upon to the point that they're exploited, it will become just as everything else. It will have a seasonality. It will have an effect where it will not be something that can handle market share and sustain it. So use Facebook as an example. That company is being sued, or has been sued, for being what it is, sharing other people's data, etc. From a business perspective, though, it has not had the same issues that other businesses would have when it comes to monopoly law and things of that nature. So at some point, the law is going to have to include monopoly type viewpoints, because you can't continue to go after and attack other businesses for monopoly status if you don't go after a Facebook for monopoly status. And what I mean is a social media platform that is so big that they can tell you what you can and cannot say on that platform, which does impact your constitutional rights, but you are using a platform that is now licensed and subsidiarily owned by a business, so they should have some rules about what is allowed on their platform. But from a monopoly standpoint, there's no greater example of a monopoly in social media, or in that business, which is social media, than Facebook. Look at MySpace and that other stuff. They don't exist anymore. There are other small platforms that own a percentage of 1% of the volume that is on those platforms. So that, I think, is something that should be called out around that thought process, that this information technology is going to be the bottom line for business going forward, because it's simple. People need food. They need clothing. Right? They need local subsistence type products, goods, and services. Right? You can't fast line those things and make an exponential organization out of those things. So there is a limitation to what can be an exponential organization. This book suggests that that's not the case. the biggest thing about this and what is identified through this is businesses such as Airbnb, and that one that was the global mapping company. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of what it is at the moment. But basically, they use other people's assets that they then sell as a service. Okay, so Airbnb is a fine example. They compared Airbnb to hotels. You can't compare Airbnb to hotels, because hotels have a standard structure, a standard product, a standardization of business, and they have been around for thousands of years. So there's an expectation for a hotel that most people are willing to risk, whereas they're not on an Airbnb. An Airbnb, you don't know if you can find it. You don't know if the driveway's like, or the rooms, are there cameras? Is it safe? There's all these other things. Airbnb literally started as a business that wanted you to rent out a room in your house. So basically, you have 3 bedrooms, you occupy 2, you make the third one an Airbnb bedroom, and someone can stay in your house as opposed to staying at a hotel. There are a lot of benefits to that. Don't get me wrong. I hate staying in hotels. The walls are too thin. As soon as you get to sleep, somebody's kids are running down the hall. 2 a.m., all the drunks are coming back and down the halls. I've traveled this country, all over. And I'm talking about the United States, guys, if you're not familiar with where I'm at. But I traveled this country all over, and it's always the same thing. There's loud people, loud children. The walls are paper thin. There's a baby crying, and of course the baby doesn't cry until from 2 to 4 in the morning. If you have a meeting at 8 o'clock where you're explaining how to spend $6 or $7 million to 15 people, that really can damage how you perform that day because the walls were too thin in the hotel. So honestly, I understand the thought process around an Airbnb. Then it's just 2 people, and if they don't have kids and they don't have pets, and the bedroom is clean and the bathroom is clean, and you're not worried about cameras, you can go in there and get a good nap, maybe better sleep, and maybe it's closer to where you're going to present, etc., etc. So there are some business models that will have hyper growth, and that's one of them. But the point is, that's what people used to do before the hotel proliferation. And at the time, hotels were proliferated because that was supposed to be safer, more accommodating for people. And then the government wanted to get their piece, which is why people stopped doing that. And also, you used to have a sense of community in churches. So if you traveled somewhere, one church member would get in touch with a family member and you would stay with them. So you weren't paying for the hotel in the first place. So these problems that these modern technologies are attacking are problems that we invented as modern problems 100 years ago. So that's the other thing too. It's all about life cycle. So when it comes to exponential organizations and the book by Salim Ismail, I don't know if it's a fine book to read and get some case studies out of, okay? But beyond that, that's about what it is. Get it from the library. I wouldn't waste your money on buying a copy of this. I did buy it, and I will most likely hold on to it because there's some quotes in there that are worth using. But here's the point. Most organizations cannot be exponential organizations. Most product lines don't lend themselves to that business model process. Information technology, social media type technology, the TikToks of the world. Yes, TikTok is huge, extremely prolific form of media, but think about the quality of the product you're putting out in the world when it comes to that. Okay, and with TikTok, I'll go to the whole confusion around what is a man and a woman in Western countries. It's so freaking ridiculous that it had so many users of a certain age group. People actually thought portions of the population thought this. No, they don't. You have extreme versions of small groups of people that have this opinion, even though it's ridiculous and absolutely stupid and absurd. Then you had other mentally challenged people that were grabbing onto this, and now it became a community. That's the threat with things that are that big. It's not information at all. It's disinformation. So when it comes to a company, would you really want to have that type of structural influence, that type of limitless influence and occupation by folks that might not be interested in what you're doing or how you're doing what it is you're doing? Because my idea for organization is the old corporation type thought process that I'm going to live maybe 100 years. I'd like my business to live 300 or 1,000. So I want to build something that has a structure that will last this period of time. If you look at these exponential organizational institutions, most of them don't last a lifetime of 16 years. Most of them, it's much, much slighter than that. So yes, it may produce immense wealth for a few people for a very short period of time, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't last a very long time. It may be an immense amount of wealth. Don't get me wrong. But the generation that's seeing this type of proliferation of things, they don't hold on to any money anyway. So it would be a very short-term thing. I remember somebody being on the cover of Forbes, and they they had a stock exchange deal that went out, and they said that this young lady was worth $1.4 billion or something like that. And of course, she had no assets, which is what Exponential Organization, what this book suggests is that you don't have to buy your own assets, that you could use things that are already in place. And so she had no assets or anything like that. They said she was worth 1.4, and within like a few months, turned out that it was fiction and the whole thing collapsed. So that's just kind of my thought process around that thinking. I do think it's worth a read if you are in information technology or in social media as a platform that you want to proliferate and cultivate into a career. If that's something that you do, there is a way that this may be beneficial. And one of the quotes I just mentioned, actually, the lifetime of a company that is what did it say? Babson-Olin Graduate School of Business. In 2011, Babson-Olin Graduate School of Business predicted that in 10 years, 40% of existing Fortune 500 companies will no longer survive. And then Richard Foster of Yale University estimated that the average lifespan of an S&P 500 company has decreased all of a sudden from 67 years in the 20s to 15 years today. I think this just proves that you can find anything to support your opinion. If you look long enough, statistics are like that. You can get a statistic to support anything. Literally, one time in college when I was doing an argument around a certain thought process, it was a great class. It was around debate, social debate. This was before all the social platforms existed. And so I would pick an idea that I was very much in align with and agreed to, and then I would pick an opposite idea that I completely disagreed with, and I would find statistics to support both sides. And then no matter which side I got put on, I could dominate because I would find statistics. Well, the point about statistics is if you listed 7,000 statistics on the page, you'd get nowhere because each time those statistics could counterpoint each other individual statistics. So that's the one thing I'd say about that with a lot of the stuff that was quoted in here. What I'll say that this is that there are exponential businesses across the world in all different business lines, okay? And it's not about the thought process of the business specifically. It's more about how you up the business and run the business. So that's why I think Lean, Six Sigma, those type things, if you get out of the process talk and just a celebration of definitions through the process, because let me tell you, I've done Lean projects for companies, and you get there and the people just want to talk about Lean for days and days, not actually the scope of the project and the cost out that they're trying to achieve and the expected waste reductions that they're expecting to achieve. That, I think, is a better focus. If you're wanting to build a business and you want to have a successful business for quite some time, I would stay away from this and just get around Lean and get around those thought processes around the business. First, find the product, make sure there's a demand, and if you can do that, get after it, start going, and then every single year should be a celebration of cutting cost year over year. That's what you should look like. That's how you build a successful business, exponential or not. So that's my view of this book, Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail. Not too impressed. I do think there's some worthwhile talking points in it, but you can find those most likely on articles online. I'm Ben. If you like subjects like these and channels such as these, please subscribe, please like, please share. Be good.